are listening to the Outlaw Podcast with me, your host, Andrea Hall. I am a certified equine Gestalt coach, speaker, 3-time author, and lawyer. I help women lawyers who are miserable in their career, struggling with mental and emotional health issues, wanting to have fun in their lives, and struggling to be selfish. After fulfilling my dream of being a criminal defense attorney and opening my own law practice right out of law school, I thought I had it all. While at the height of my career, my 18-month-old puppy died, and I thought, what am I killing myself for? Sometime later, I was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and my world turned upside down. It was in that moment I realized something had to change. This podcast is about sharing my journey with you about what is possible in your life outside the legal profession, stopping the adulting and being able to play as a child, inspiring you to dream again. Let the journey begin. Welcome to episode 1 of Outlaw. There is life after litigation. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to sharing with you my journey of how I got started in the legal profession and eventually how I decided to leave the legal profession. As a little kid, I loved to argue, and ultimately, it was a choice between law school or med school. And since I struggled with math, which I'll save for a different day, I decided that it was going to be much easier to go to law school. So I decided I was going to go to law school after I completed my undergrad in criminal justice. Unfortunately, I did not get accepted to law school right away. So I worked 2 and 3 jobs after I graduated, and in the meantime, I continued to have that burning desire to be a litigator. Well, I was in a horse riding accident and survived after being in a wheelchair for 6 months and having 3 operations on my shoulder. However, I decided to reach back out to the dean of the law school at the University of North Dakota and said, just tell me why I didn't get into law school and what I can do to make it happen. And he said to me, I don't think you'll get through law school, but we'll be happy to take your money. And that's all I needed to hear. I hung up the phone, I quit my job, and I moved 3 hours away within the next 2 weeks. Unfortunately, while I was celebrating the good news that I was going to be going to law school, I got a DUI. And it was at that point in time that I realized and had my first experience of how jaded the criminal justice system was. The officer who arrested me was an officer who used to come into the restaurant where I was a server. He would get off shift at 11 o'clock, and he and his buddies would come in and drink Long Island teas and have wings from 11 o'clock until 1 o'clock in the morning and get in their car and drive home. This was the same officer who got on the witness stand at the Department of Motor Vehicle hearing and told the hearing officer about my demeanor and my behavior and how I was acting. And I remember pulling my lawyer out into the hallway saying, how can he get on the stand and lie like that? He's not telling the truth. He doesn't know who I am. In fact, when he would come into the restaurant where I worked, I was irritated because they would be my only table, and had they not been there, I could have actually gone home. Yet I had to stay and wait on him and his buddies while they drank Long Island teas and had wings. And I remember my attorney saying to me, unfortunately, because you did have some alcohol in your system, you're not going to be believed. The hearing officer will only believe the cop. And I remember saying at that moment in time, That will never happen again on my watch. And so I vowed that day moving forward that I was going to be a zealous advocate for my clients. And I absolutely was. I graduated from law school, I moved to Colorado, and I started to study for the bar. And anybody who's taken the bar exam knows that it is very strenuous. It's 2 or 3 days out of your life that you can never get back, and you kill a lot of brain cells. Well, unfortunately, the bar exam is only offered twice a year, and by the time you take the exam and wait for the results, it's not long before you have to start preparing for the exam again if you didn't pass. Well, unfortunately, in my case, I didn't pass. I was short a few points. And it's very stressful because the first day of the bar exam, at least in Colorado, is multiple choice. And you literally have like a minute and 10 or 15 seconds to answer each and every question that is approximately 3 to 4 paragraphs long. And of course, there's always at least 2 answers that could be the actual answer. And the next day is 6 hours of speed writing and hoping that your hand will hold out until you can finish answering the question and throwing every possible scenario into your result or into your answer, excuse me. Well, like I said, I didn't pass the bar the first time, and so I spent the next several months studying for the bar the second time. And lo and behold, I passed the bar the second time. And in this process, I was also looking for a job. And I was very clear that the only thing I wanted to do was be a criminal defense attorney. Well, unfortunately, there's not a lot of firms that just specialize in criminal defense. A lot of firms require you to partake in other areas of the law, like being a divorce attorney or some sort of a civil attorney in other arenas. And I knew that the only thing I wanted to do was practice criminal defense. And I said, I've spent a lot of time and money going to school and learning how to do something. I am not going to allow somebody else to tell me what I can and cannot do with my career. So it was at that point in time that I started taking every criminal defense attorney out to lunch, picking their brain and figuring out what it was going to take to open my own law practice. I guess you could say I was pretty naive, and I guess that's what malpractice insurance is for, right? Little did I know that I would actually open my own law practice very shortly thereafter. And I got cases from those defense attorneys who the clients couldn't afford to hire them. So I worked a job during the day, at night. And during the day, I sat in the courtroom and prayed that they wouldn't call my case first. And I listened to the people that went before me at the public defender's office and other private attorneys. And I would stand up when they called my case, and I would repeat after them. And I faked it until I made it. That is how I started my law practice right out of law school. And I worked the night job for a full year as a waitress at the country club until I was successful enough and making enough money that I could quit my night job. And I trained with the best. I got mentored by some of the best attorneys in the industry in my local area. And I was on the fast track of making my career a success. I was sure that all my dreams were coming true. I owned my own practice. I was able to take my own cases. I got to choose who I was going to represent. And I got to pick my own hours. What lawyer doesn't have this dream? And I specialized in sex offenses and domestic violence, which are very stressful, and a lot of times the clients were looking at life in prison. I remember being in a 5-day jury trial. My 18-month-old puppy had been struggling. She had gotten sick the month before and unfortunately was having seizures, and the medication that they had given me just wasn't working. And she was seizing profusely during this 5-day jury trial, and I had been back and forth and to the emergency room and to the vet with her numerous times during these 5 days. And the night before closing arguments, I remember her having another seizure and going to the emergency room with her. And it was at that point in time that I wasn't for sure if I was going to pick her up and bring her back home. And I remember going to sleep that evening, struggling because I hadn't had a lot of sleep during this trial, barely being prepared every day, making a record with the court, telling them how I was struggling and what I was going through at home in my personal life. And unfortunately, I got the dreaded phone call about 5 in the morning. The hospital called me and told me that Bella had seized and had passed away. And it was so gut-wrenching to know that I wasn't with her. I picked up the phone and I called the court clerk's office, and I left a message and I said my puppy had passed away. Could you send the jury home for breakfast? Tell them we have to work on something and that they can come back after lunch just to give me enough time to get my head together and finish a closing argument. And the court said to me, no, you have 30 minutes to get to court. And I thought in that moment, what would have happened if that had been my husband or my child? Well, I probably would have ended up in jail and had to hire my own criminal defense attorney. However, I sucked it up and took one for the team. And I showed up in court and I zealously made another record that day. And my client knew how distraught I was and what I had been going through. And he reassured me that everything was going to be okay. Now, this case wasn't a slam dunk, and I knew going into it that the outcome would more than likely be a guilty verdict. The evidence was against my client, yet we had no offer, so we had no choice except to hold the prosecution's feet to the fire and make sure that the prosecution and the police did their job and that the Constitution was upheld. And it was the first time in my career that I had actually experienced what my clients felt like on a daily basis when they entered the courtroom. The judge felt so unsympathetic to the facts and circumstances of what I had going on. And unfortunately, at the end of that, and the experience I had, my thought was, what am I killing myself for? Because at the end of the day, my clients don't send me baby announcements. I don't get Christmas cards in the mail. And for the most part, they struggle paying their bill. And after the case is over, I'm the least of their concerns. They move on with their life, and they don't need me anymore. And so I took some time off. I played with my nephew. It was the first time in years that I actually went to an amusement park. I went to the pool and swam. I just played. I didn't have an agenda. I didn't have to look at my cell phone, pay attention to my calendar, wondering what case was coming up. Did I have motions to file? What needed to happen? And it was at this point in time that I said, wow, I actually get to relax. And after taking time off and the ability to de-escalate, at the end of the summer when it was time to go back to work, and I even had the thought of going back to work, my body completely changed. My heart rate started racing. My breathing pattern changed. I could feel my body shift, and I came into this fight or flight mode, and I became very aggressive, and my voice was ready to kill again. And I remember those days when I first started practicing law. However, what I realized in that moment was the kill was no longer fun for me. And it was the first time in my life that I said, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with my life when I grow up? Because I had always known when I graduated from high school where I was going to go to college, what degree I was going to get, that I wanted to go to law school, that I wanted to be a criminal defense attorney. This was the first time that I was out in the middle of the ocean floundering, going, can someone throw me a life preserve? Like, what's next? What am I going to do? Because the only thing I ever wanted to do and be was a lawyer. So I, of course, went back to work because the bills don't pay themselves and the mortgage company doesn't care that you decided you didn't want to be a lawyer. Yet there was this struggle internally because I identified with being a lawyer. That's who I was. That was my status. I could walk into a room and somebody would say, who are you and what do you do? And I'd say, I'm a lawyer. And it was like Moses had parted the sea. Oh, you have arrived, right? And I thought, what am I going to do if I'm not a lawyer? My family members questioned why I was going to give up a career that I so desired and that I was utterly amazing at. It's not like I wasn't a good attorney. I was absolutely amazing at what I did. Yet there was this burning desire inside of me for something more. And so I went on a soul-searching journey. And it was at this point in time of starting the journey that I was also beginning to become physically ill. I was starting to get headaches. And progressively over the next 3 years while I was on this journey, the headaches progressively got worse to the point that I was actually passing out, short-circuiting. And in my words, what I was saying was, it feels like the circulation to my brain is being cut off. And I remember being introduced by a friend to some horse work. And everybody knew that I loved horses and that they were my passion. Even though, like I told you at the beginning of this podcast, I had been in a horse riding accident. Now, don't get me wrong, it took me a while to get over my trepidation around being with the horses again. Yet eventually, I still had that same yearning and that same desire to be with these creatures, even though I had been hurt by them. I couldn't shut that off. And my mom said to me, you really want to be around them even though you've been hurt? And I knew that there was something that was calling me to them. So during this process, I got introduced by a friend who was my massage therapist to a lady who was trained in a different modality. And it was the first time that I did energy work with the horses when I realized that something was different. When I was at the barn standing with the horses, my world completely disappeared. My breathing pattern changed. I got grounded and centered, and all of my answers appeared. And it was the first time in a long time that I had actually gotten in touch with my intuition, and that I was able to hear my body physically speaking to me. Ultimately, after that experience, I said, this is the ticket. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I started on a journey of looking for what type of work I could do that combined my love for helping people and using horses in that process. And I ultimately was certified by Melissa Pierce through the Touched by a Horse program and became an equine Gestalt coach. And I know that sounds like a big word for a lot of people. However, it basically just means that I work with horses in a partnership and we bring people to wholeness. And so I was able to complete this 2-year certification program with her, and I too was able to heal my unfinished business with the horses. And if you haven't read my book, Touched by a Horse, I suggest that you go to my website and get that, where I share my journey of just one of the many experiences I had with a horse called Jack, who helped me heal my desire and surrender to the dream of one day becoming a mother. Ultimately, after getting certified, I decided that I wanted to help other women lawyers who are struggling with some of the same things I struggled with in that 3-year process. Allowing my ego to get in the way, allowing my fear to get in the way, allowing friends and family members to get in the way of what I believed I truly wanted and desired. I was struggling in my career. I was completely miserable. I definitely had physical issues in my body. I was having no fun, and there was no balance and no time for myself, no ability to be selfish. And after realizing what was possible and opening some doors on the other side, I realized I could be well. I could be happy. And most of all, I could have excitement again in my life and balance. During this journey of being physically ill, it was discovered that I had a brain tumor. And I remember getting the phone call after leaving the doctor's office and completing the MRI, and the doctor saying, "I need to see you immediately." And then getting to the doctor's office and hearing those words, "You have a brain tumor." I'm pretty sure I didn't hear anything after that. I immediately went into task mode and figuring out what was next and how do I resolve this problem. After lots of struggles with the insurance company and arguing if I had done enough, did I need to go to physical therapy? Were they going to do the MRI with contrast or without contrast? Is the contrast going to be in the brain or in the spine or both? I remember saying to the insurance company, "I'm going to add you to the list of people I sue when you find out I had a brain tumor and you sent me to physical therapy? Are you kidding me?" Now, looking back on that, I think, wow, subconsciously I already knew what was the matter with me, yet I needed to get my conscious mind on board with what was physically going on in my body. Thankfully, I received a Christmas miracle that year, and the tumor was benign, and I survived. Now, it was a long process of healing even after the tumor was removed, because your mind plays tricks on you. Like, I would look in the mirror and my body would say you're physically fine, yet within a couple hours I was collapsing because my mind could not do the work that I was once trained to do. Unfortunately, it was at that point in time that I had to make a decision. Was I going to stay or was I going to go? And for me, this was a 2x4 upside the head, because I remember after hearing the news, I immediately came home and grabbed Louise Hay's book, How to Heal Your Life. And I looked up what the definition of a brain tumor meant, and I realized how I had potentially created this brain tumor. I was living in my head. I had been living in my head for numerous years. However, specifically for the last 7 years, that is where I lived 24/7, in my head. And I vowed at that point in time that I was going to do something different with my life. And something different I chose. And that's when I completed the certification program with Melissa and decided that I needed to help other women lawyers who were struggling just like me. Once I became open to the possibilities that there was something better out there for me and let my ego lay at the foot of the bed, the answers started to come to me. I was able to be a kid again. I was able to say no and create boundaries and be selfish once again. I hope that this episode has showed you that there is life after litigation. If you can resonate with this and some of what I have said is your story, please follow me on Facebook. Send me an email at andrea@witherswhisper.com and let's schedule a free consultation to see how I can help you and show you that there is life after litigation.